after Khabib was in the crowd attacking his team, and other members of Khabib's team were in the cage
Where they don't belong.
with you know, intent in their eyes to do something. What do you want him to do?
At that point,
And by the way, sorry to interrupt. Lest we forget, he just got in a fight.
yeah.
Who knows how much is up there right now? You know what I mean? He just got choked out.
Yeah, agreed. But at that
Conor
point,
McGregor threw the first punch. Shut up. Leave me alone. Leave everyone alone. Shut up. We do not care about who threw the first punch. That turned into a brawl. Enough.
yes.
Please, for the sake of our sanity, enough.
Yeah, at that point, Conor McGregor has to look out for his own safety. I believe he felt threatened, and I believe rightfully so. No, I have no issue with anything that happened on Conor McGregor's side.
I mean, it's very clear. And this is not us. Like, what do you want us to say? What he did in Brooklyn, and I said it a million times.
Yeah.
And I had Rose on the show, and I had Ray Borg on the show, and I had Michael Chiesa on the show. I had everyone under the sun. What he did in Brooklyn was indefensible. Go back to that show after Brooklyn.
Yep.
I said it. What, you want me to keep repeating it every week? What do you want us to do?
And the two things are not related.
Well, exactly. Oh, but he did this. Do you realize how stupid you people sound?
Yeah.
Do you realize? Now, it's important to talk about Brooklyn when talking about the sort of thought process
Sure.
behind what Khabib did. I'm having a hard time blaming Khabib. You don't hear me like, I'm not saying I don't think Khabib should be stripped. I don't think he should be suspended.
Yeah.
I understand what. Fine. All right, you want to fine him? Go ahead, slap him on the wrist. But what is the suspension anyway? 6 months? Who cares, right?
Yeah.
Well, he's not fighting in 6 months. I have a problem with members of his team piecing up Conor.
Yeah. Of course.
Lighting him up.
Of course.
That was between him and Khabib. By the way, those guys weren't on the bus,
Yeah.
right? So I have a problem with that. And one has nothing to do with the other. Oh, you defend Conor. No, in that moment, Conor's hands are clean. I'm sorry.
I have no issue there. I think the heart of this matter is justice. The heart of this
Sure.
entire thing is justice.
Yes.
Habib and his team feel like Conor has skated by too long without being checked. Nobody's checked Conor, and they felt, and Habib and his team took it upon themselves. They felt that it was their responsibility, that the fight wasn't enough. Conor hadn't been punished. That this was an unjust situation. Why is he allowed to get away with things that I'm not allowed to get away with? And they took it upon themselves to enact that.
Well, that was the theme of the week.
Certainly.
Why should he come late?
And in the post-fight speech, he spoke very pointedly about the idea, this is the laundry list of things Conor's done. Why is everybody talking about me? So at the heart of all of this, I think more than any personal attacks, I really don't believe personal attacks are what this is about. I think this is about Habib and his team feeling that Conor's been unchecked, feeling that there isn't justice in the way he's treated, and they took it upon themselves to try to enact that justice. It's misguided, obviously. I don't think that there's any justification for being able to jump into the cage and attack somebody. But it stems from that. It stems from feeling like they're being treated differently and he's being treated differently than they are. It's unfortunate that it came to that. But I don't think there's any denying or doubt that this is the heart of the matter.
I understand where he's coming from. I understand how personal it is. I understand when you talk about his dad, it's deeply personal. As we're doing this right now, there is a soccer stadium filled with people who are celebrating Khabib and his family. It's just very personal, right?
Absolutely.
And you're talking about Dagestan. You're talking about, like, we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, how this was reaching uncharted territory. So I'm not necessarily surprised that it turned into this. And if you look at the reaction, like what this does to people, this feud, the reaction is emotional, and I get it. And that's part of the appeal of this fight. It's emotional. In the moment, I remember thinking to myself, man, this sucks.
Yeah.
The eyes of the world, the sports world, are on us right now, and this is what they're seeing, and we continue to almost shoot ourselves in the foot.
Yeah.
Right? Every time there's something, it's, whether it's Brock acting the way he did at UFC 100 or UFC 200 when the eyes were on, and the John Jones situation, and then the Brock, like, it always seems like we continue to shoot ourselves in the foot. And of course that's not often the case. There's great moments, right, that are worth celebrating. Last year at MSG, but in this case, the eyes of the sports world were on us, and the sport had a great night up until that moment, and it was super unfortunate. But it could have been worse. And I think that Conor not pressing charges tells you how he feels about the whole situation.
Absolutely.
And I firmly believe that they will use this footage and that they will use this moment to sell the rematch. Dana White, saying it did well over $2 million today. Why wouldn't they?
Why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
You mentioned all these moments. What has been the lasting repercussions of any of that?
Nothing.
It's very momentary.
Yeah.
It happens that night.
It's disgusting.
It happens for a week.
It's disappointing.
Then it turns into a promo, and then we move on. There's really not a precedent for any of those moments having lasting repercussions.
If you think that they are not going to do this rematch, you have not been paying attention.
For sure.
And it's not about does he deserve it. It's not about merit. It's about who draws the most. And the world will watch it. There's no doubt about it. The world will watch it. And they will sell it. And it will maybe even do better.
Yeah, one of the reasons that we watch this sport, one of the reasons that we enjoy it, one of the reasons that people continue to call things violence and things like that is because there's an element of danger to it. If there was no element of danger, it would be a different thing. There is an element to this that people want to see, regardless of whether they feel Khabib should be punished for his actions, whether they think it's right or wrong. The idea that something can go off the rails, the idea that somebody can be hurt is one of the appeals, is one of the things that people watch for. If everything was sanitized, if everything was strategic point fighting, nobody would watch. That's just not what this is. And the idea that some of that now spills outside of the cage is what we have to deal with and live with. There is an element to this that is unsafe. There is an element to this that is not sanitized, that is not controlled. And that lack of control is something that I think appeals. And the reason why these promos are so interesting. The reason why when Khabib says, "Send me location," is because the implication is when you send him the location, these two will be on the street and they will get into a fight. And everybody's lapping it up and eating it up. Send me location. It's so funny. He wasn't joking. He's serious. He wants you to send him location. And that element of danger, that idea that Khabib is a gangster or whatever people want to attribute to that, is what's appealing, is something that is inside of us and that is at a base level something that we want. So this chaos, I think it's something that we kind of court and something that will definitely not have a negative impact. Now, maybe there's viewers that weren't going to watch again anyway that are going, this is not for me. I don't think they were going to be the ones you were going to hook. They're not the long-term ones that you were going to get anyway.
Soccer moms.
Soccer moms tuning in are going to go, this is disgusting.
Yeah.
Now, there's some strong voices out there that will say that, but I don't think that will be the people that would have been converted anyway. I don't think those are the people that would have gone, I like this. I think you're more likely to get more people watching because of it. The attention that this has gotten, I think you're much more likely to have a positive impact than a negative impact.
Because people don't watch MMA through the same lens that they watch the NFL or the NBA. To them, this is Saturday night at the circus.
Yeah.
And the circus delivered. And it's the closest thing to real-life pro wrestling for them, the way they view WWE. Like, I see it, too. I see respected journalists, the way they talk about MMA, and they treat it more like WWE than they do, as far as holding it to a standard. It's way different than MLB, NHL. Now, I said earlier that Conor's hands were clean in that moment, in that, 3 minutes. But I just want to be very clear. I don't think anyone's hands are clean when you talk about April to October. Do you agree with that? Like what I said at the top of the show, in terms of, hey, Chris Eubank calling me, I'll call him back. In terms of, the build from April to October, everyone played a part in this becoming, this combustible situation.
It's very important to differentiate between excusing something and just recognizing something. By saying that Conor McGregor, Khabib, UFC, everybody played a part in this escalating to the point that it did, is not saying that Khabib had free reign to do what he wanted, to attack somebody outside the cage, or for his teammates and friends to jump into the cage and attack somebody. By acknowledging that there was a build to this, by acknowledging that other people were party to it, you're not saying that that gives him any right that he wants to go do that thing. And I think people are confusing the idea that by acknowledging that, you're saying he was allowed to. He was not allowed to. And I disagree with you on one thing. I think he should be punished in a significant way.
Who's this?
Khabib.
Okay.
I think he should be punished in a significant way.
What does significant way mean?
You don't know what that is? That's not for me.
By the way, that's on the UFC than Nevada.
Right. That's
well,
not.
When you say significant, you have to have an idea. What is a significant?
The reason I say significant, and it's not necessarily one specific thing or another. I say significant because the situation that we're talking about, the lead up to this, is what Khabib reacted to. Is that Conor McGregor was unchecked. He was doing something that now led to this. If we now say, Khabib, you have a slap on the wrist or no punishment for this, we're just continuing to go down that same path. It's just going to lead to the same thing. There has to be some repercussion for acting that way. Now, that's not without saying that we don't understand why he felt that way. He's just not allowed to act that way. I think Chael, as you said, has summed it up perfectly. Like, the build up to this was what it was, and that's when you have to leave it in the cage after that point.
Yeah.
So I don't know what significant is. If he was stripped, would I feel that he was, that it was unjustified, that he was done wrong by this? I would say no.
Oh, man, that would create a holy war. Because on the other hand, you have Conor, who, was stripped.
Yeah.
But in the build-up of this fight, they're giving him his belt back essentially. Like they are assisting him in holding. It's not Chael showing up at UFC on Fox 2 before Rashad Evans with the fake belt. They're actually saying here, they're flaunting him on embedded as 2A world champion. Now you're going to take the belt away from Khabib. I'm not trying to say Khabib's hands are clean either. I mean, he ignited this. There is no brawl if he doesn't jump in there. None of this happens.
Yeah,
the fight is over.
Conor was not interested in that.
No,
at that
he was
point.
done. Look at the look on his face.
Yeah.
He was done. He was done. It was over in that moment.
And we expect that from Conor.
Yeah.
Conor, when the fight is done, and he typically
and you
reacts
could
in
say,
that
like,
way.
Dylan sat here and said some stuff about Khabib, but like, did he, did that warrant jumping in? No, crazy things are just said all the time. But this was the buildup of everything that was said.
Yeah.
In a weird way, Khabib was directing his vitriol in the wrong direction.
Sure, certainly.
Like, it should have been in Conor's direction. He just beat him, so maybe that was enough in his mind, and now he wanted to do a little more. But I just think because you set the precedent of doing nothing, and because there is a double standard in this sport, because if Ray Borg was the one throwing dollies, he'd be gone. Dana said it at the post-fight press conference. I just couldn't believe it. Said it in the post-fight press conference. If any of those people are under UFC contract, they're gone. What? What do you mean? You literally just, in this case, you cannot play that game. Like, everyone has to be treated the same in this case, in my opinion.
I think as far as the UFC goes, yes. As far as Nevada goes,
well, it's up to, of course. No, Nevada's under a different set of rules because they are licensed fighters in that moment. Conor is not licensed in New York. They couldn't do anything. Nevada can't strip him. They can fine him. They can suspend him.
Yep.
They also can't cut him. They can't cut him from the UFC.
That's promotional decision.
Right. So I fully expect a suspension of some kind. I fully expect a fine. To suggest him getting stripped, or to suggest any of those guys, as much as I disagree with what they did, I just don't know how you justify it.
Well, what would be the UFC's motivation to even do that at this point?
He said it.
No. Okay, let's set aside the people, the ancillary figures involved. I'm talking about Khabib specifically. What would be their motivation to strip him? What would be their motivation to do that? They have not done that in the past. Why would they establish a new precedent now on that? They will more than likely, and I think it would be the right move, wait to see what Nevada does and support and
well, this is the time that the UFC sort of hides behind the ideas like we're regulated by the government. Like they could put their foot down if they want. They could, but they're not.
It doesn't behoove them.
If I don't know, Sergio Pettis ran into the crowd and started beating up Jussier Formiga's team, he would have been gone. Dana would have been at the press conference. He would have killed him. It's just different. There's different rules for different people, and so
there are.
In this moment, it's very clear that Conor has a different set of rules. Khabib has a different set of rules. He's not getting cut.
No.
Khabib's teammates should not be cut either, even though they're 100% expendable. Like, no one knows who they are.
You yourself are acknowledging the rules are different. Like,
No, so I'm saying this whole story needs to be different.
Yeah, I mean,
it just has to be. You can have different rules within the same story. The whole story has to be the same. You can't have this guy's going to get in trouble, but this guy's not going to get in trouble. Like, that's just a little... I mean, listen.
Their part in it was different as well.
I've been proven wrong before, but that one seems completely unjustifiable. but who knows?
Sometimes you
There's
make
no
a
rhyme or
point.
reason to this. There's
That's
no rhyme
the
or reason.
thing.
It's
That's
just
the thing.
total whimsical.
You don't. There's no reason to set the precedent now. There's no
we
reason.
could sit here and debate this all day. There is no reason. You can send me all your Zapruder films you want. Every angle of Connor throwing the first punch. I mean, what is prompting that? I can't even. Anyway, you could sit there and do it all day. It's unprecedented stuff for our sport, and also there's no rhyme. There's no code.
No.
There's no fighter code. They can say that
They
there is one,
can
but
hand out the punishment
do
as
whatever
they feel fit, if any punishment. Nevada is the separate issue.
It was a
that
bummer
would
in the
be
moment.
important.
Now here I am, 48 hours later or so, and I'm saying, you know what? We should have probably expected something like this. And again, I think they did a great job of.
3, 2, 1. Here we are again.
Hey, Joe.
Hello, Jordan.
How
Good
you
to see
doing, man?
I'm doing great. You have the schedule that you have and the amount of energy and enthusiasm you maintain with the schedule is very remarkable because you're not stopping. You're not slowing down. I mean, you've had your foot on the gas for like 2 solid years now.
Make hay while the sun shines.
I guess so. Is that what it is? Is that how you feel about it?
Well, you know, when you have an opportunity that's completely preposterous, you're a fool to take it for granted.
Yeah,
You know?
I guess that's it,
so,
right?
and yeah, so Tammy and I have been to 100 cities since January. So everywhere, you know, and part of what keeps us going, well, first of all, I have a really good crew, you know, like the CAA guys, they're really good. Live Nation's been really good. They make sure the theaters are smooth, and we've had no problems at all. And then I have lots of people who are helping me with my scheduling, and Tammy travels with me. And then the lectures themselves, well, I really like doing them, partly because I do a different lecture every night, and so that keeps me sharp, and it makes sure that I'm thinking about new things all the time and trying to formulate my thoughts more precisely. And they're also unbelievably positive. So that's also something that makes it a lot easier to do, because you know, I go to a city and there's 1,500 to 2,000 people waiting for me there, which is like staggering in and of itself wherever I go, and they're all there listening intently, and it's a sophisticated discussion, or at least as sophisticated as I can make it, and I'm communicating directly with the audience, and all the people are there to try to get their lives together. And so the feeling in the hall is really, really positive. And then I usually talk to about 150 people afterwards, and you know, all of them, well, many of them, you know, they just say hi and they're polite, and we have a photograph and all that, but lots of them have stories about how they've been putting their lives together, and they're thrilled to death about it, you know, that they're out of the hole they were in, or they've started a new business, or they've sold a new business, or they just decided to get married, or they're going to have some kids, or they've fixed up their relationship with their parents, or they quit drinking, and they're not addicted. I talked to one guy in Europe. He'd stopped. He was addicted. I don't remember what to, but it was something that wasn't good. He'd stopped for 9 months and got 9 of his friends to quit too. So he comes up, he's just like bouncing, you know. He's so damn happy that his life is better, and not only that he had this additional positive effect on other people. So, and it's so fun because I have these conversations with people. They're brief, but they're very personal and they're very intense, you know, because you think people have to trust you to tell you that their lives weren't going so well. And then they have to trust you even more to tell you that they're going better now, because, of course, what you want when you tell someone that things are going better is you want real encouragement and real sense from the person you're talking to that they're happy for you. And I'm absolutely thrilled to hear these things. Like, I was in Whole Foods this morning. I went down near where I'm staying, and 2 of the guys that work behind the meat counter came out to talk to me, and independently, and they'd both been reading my books and watching my lectures, and one of them said he had a 7-year-old son. He really wanted to do right by him. He was looking for ethical and moral guidance, and you know, he found the books really helpful, and then it was helping him put his life together. And so guy at the car rental place last night told me the same thing, and so it's so exciting, so ridiculously exciting to go everywhere around the world, and to go into airports or to walk down the street and have people come up and say, I've been watching you on YouTube. They often mention you. I've been listening to what you say. I've been developing a vision for my life. It's really helped me out a lot. Thanks a lot. And Jesus, like to be able to have that happen, you know, time after time, day after day, all over the place, that's just absolutely, it makes going to 100 cities like continually energizing because it's so positive. And so, and then there's all this weird crap in the press, you know, about my dangerous followers and all this alt-right nonsense. And it's so ridiculous, you know. I've talked to 250,000 people in 7 months. We haven't had one incident that was negative in that entire time. Not one, nothing. No misbehavior on anyone's part. We had one heckler who was obviously not a fan of mine, given that he was a heckler. That was it. Other than that, the audiences behave perfectly. They all dress up. They come in suits, which is really cool. A lot of the young guys, they dress up. So they have a little suit competition with me, which is quite fun. So that's an additional bonus. And yeah, it's pretty damn good, Joe.
I think it's really fantastic. And I think what's going on is it makes me very optimistic, because I think that one of the things that new media has provided is these new avenues for information to get out there. And these new things like these lecture circuits. When was the last time you saw public lecture circuits that were popular to the tune of thousands and thousands of people? I saw the ones that you and Sam Harris did on YouTube, and you know, Sam's doing them with a lot of other people as well. You're doing them with a lot of other people, with Dave Rubin as well. These are, I mean, this is a very unique thing.
That's for sure.
And also this desire to understand new paths of behavior and patterns of thinking, and that these are corrective paths and patterns that can lead you to a more fulfilled and happier life. And recognize the pitfalls of certain types of behavior that people just fall into. And I think oftentimes the difference between someone who lives a fulfilled life and someone who lives a life filled with disaster is following incorrect patterns and not knowing what the correct ones are. So there's a lot of good people out there that live shitty lives, and they don't do it because they're just dumb or because they're bad. They do it because they've been influenced by certain patterns. They've fallen into patterns, whether it's because of the people that they surround themselves with, or the neighborhood they grew up, the people that are around them have this way of being, and they kind of fall into that, or it's drugs or it's alcohol or whatever it is. But then they find a new one, and then they can slide right into that new one, and all of a sudden they feel energized when they wake up in the morning instead of hungover. They're getting exercise in, they're eating healthy, they're starting to think about things correctly and do good things, and the momentum of them doing those good things leads them to feel good about themselves and energized. And these are all things that you promote, and that I think are genuinely really significant, like really important.
Well,
the thing is, it gets maligned. You get pushed into this weird, but what we were talking about before the podcast, by a small select group of people. It's a very small but vocal minority that wants to misrepresent you, and then there's the periphery that listen to this small group, and then they sort of parrot those words out without any real thinking about what you've said.
Well, you know, one of the things that I have made a mistake about in the past that I just realized in the last couple of weeks was that, you know, people often accuse me, and they say, well, most of the people that listen to you are men. And I think, you know, when you're accused like that, your automatic response is, well, you wouldn't be accused if you weren't doing something wrong. So there must be something wrong about that. It's like, why isn't it 50% women? And so I've said things like, well, you know, 80% of the people who watch YouTube videos are men. And so the fact that 80% of the people who watch my videos are men isn't that surprising given that base rate. But then about 3 weeks ago I started thinking, well, what the hell am I doing? It's like, what, is there something wrong with talking to men? Is that actually a problem? It's like I'm trying to I mean, I didn't set out to do that specifically, but if that's the way it's working out, and there is a majority of men coming to my shows, say, then why is that all of a sudden supposed to be a bad thing? I'm asking men to, you know, to be more honest, and especially in their speech and their thinking, and to be more responsible for themselves and for their family and for their community, and to grow up and to shoulder their burden and to live a responsible and meaningful life, and putting those two things together conceptually. And it's like, and then there's an accusation about that as if there's something wrong. And I thought, well, why am I even playing into this? It's like, fine, I'm talking to men, I'm encouraging them, and I am absolutely thrilled. Like every time someone comes up to me, and that's happening maybe 100 times a week or something like that, and tells me one of these stories about how they put their life together, it's like I'm absolutely thrilled about that. And so I don't see, it's just a sign of how pathological our times have become, in some sense, that there would have been any guilt about that to begin with. Because how is that not a good thing, man?
It's weird. I think a lot of that has to do with this concept that men are running everything, and that men have this massive advantage. There's a white male advantage and privilege that we all enjoy and share, and that men have this advantage financially. There's disparity in terms of the gender gap in pay, you know, and income. And that if you were really a good person, you would be you would be trying to balance that out, and that you wouldn't be trying to pump up the winning team.
Right,
So
well, and
like
that's the funny thing. Well, that's it. And that's part of that narrative that, well, if there's winners, there has to be losers, and the reason that there are losers is because there's winners. And that's complete bloody nonsense, because as far as I'm concerned, that, and I really believe this, is that every single person who sets out to put themselves together ethically is a net positive to everyone around them. There's no downside to that. You know, and my book has been criticized by people who've read it very poorly, especially chapter 1, when I talk about hierarchies, that I'm somehow supporting the idea that power in a hierarchy is the right way to be. And there's absolutely nothing in what I've written that suggests that at all. Like, I'm suggesting that human hierarchies are very complex, and that the way that you win in a human hierarchy is by being competent and reciprocal. And so, I mean, for example, even if you're selfish, let's say, you got to think very carefully about what that would mean if you were selfish and awake, because you have to work to take care of yourself and what you want, say, in this moment. But then there's you tomorrow, and there's you next week, and there's you next month, and next year, and 10 years from now, and when you're old. So because you're self-conscious and because you're aware of the future, you're actually a community unto yourself. And if you're selfish and impulsive, all that means is that you're serving the person you are right now, you know, in that impulsive way, but not the person you're going to be. And so that's not a good grounds for any sort of ethical behavior. And I see that if you serve yourself properly, there's no difference between that and serving your family properly and serving your community properly. That those things all mesh in a kind of a harmonious manner. And one of the things that's really been effective in the lecture tour is a discussion about that idea and its relationship between that and meaning and responsibility. Because one of the things that strikes the audience as silent constantly, because I'm always listening to them to see, you know, when the attention is maximally focused, is whenever I point out to people that the antidote to the meaninglessness of their life and the suffering and the malevolence that they might be displaying because they're resentful and bitter about how things have turned out, the antidote to that is to take on more responsibility for themselves and for other people, and that's aspirational, which is kind of cool. You know, the conservative types, the duty types, and I'm not complaining about them, you know, they're always basically saying, well, this is how you should act, because in some sense that's your duty, right? That's how a good citizen would act. And that's a reasonable argument. But the case that I've been making is more that, well, there is value distinctions between things. Some things are worth doing and some things aren't, and you can kind of discover what that is for yourself, and then you should aim at the things that are most worth doing. And what you'll find if you watch carefully is that the things that you find worth doing are almost always associated with an increase in responsibility. Because if you think about the people you admire, for example, you spontaneously admire people, and that's a manifestation of the instinct to imitate. Again, people are very imitative. You don't admire people who don't take care of themselves. Like, unless there's something wrong with you, you at least want an admirable person to be accountable for themselves. And then if they've got something left over so they can be accountable for their family, well, then that's a net plus, obviously. That's someone you think is solid. And then maybe they take care of some more people. They have a business, or they're involved in the community in some positive way. You see, well, that's a person whose pattern of being is worth imitating. And that's all associated with responsibility. And it's so interesting because it's as if everybody kind of knows this, but that it hasn't crystallized. It's like, well, you should be responsible because that's what a good citizen is. It's not, no. You should be responsible because you need to have a deep meaning in your life to offset the suffering so you don't get bitter. And the way you do that is to bear a heavy load, you know, to get yourself in check for you now and for you in the future, and then to do the same for your family and your community, and that there's real nobility in that, and there's real meaning. And more, the other thing that I've been suggesting to people, and I also believe this, is that, and I think that the guys that have come to talk to me, especially the ones that have had real rough lives, they really understand this. If you don't get your act together and you let yourself slide, then what kind of moves in to take the place of what you could have been is something that's really not good at all. So it's not only that if you're living like a dissolute life, that you're not aiming at anything positive, and so you don't have any real meaning, and you're subsumed by anxiety and all of that and hopelessness, but something kind of hellish moves in there too to occupy that place, and so then you end up making things worse. And when, you know, one of the things I learned about studying totalitarian systems, whether they were on the right or the left, was that part of the reason that the totalitarian horrors of the 20th century manifested themselves was because average people didn't take on the proper responsibility. They shut their eyes when their eyes should have been open, even though they knew it. And they did and said things they knew they shouldn't have done and said. And that was what supported those horrible systems. So, you know, if you don't get your act together, then you leave a little space for hell. And I really believe that.
Don't you think when things are happening, like something like Nazi Germany, I would imagine that during that time, the people that were not in support of it felt helpless. Whether you're in Germany, you're a part of this country is turning towards this horrible situation where Jewish people are being put on trains, and, you know, the people that didn't speak out in that, I don't necessarily know if it's a lack of discipline or just complete fear and paralysis
well, it's a fear for sure. I mean,
knowledge of how to deal with it or what to do, and
too,
wanting to protect your family as well, so not wanting to step out of line.
Absolutely. Well, that's the thing. The problem is that if you're going to forestall that sort of thing, you have to do it early. You know, because the longer you wait, the higher the price you pay for it.
But isn't it? It's hard to take that jump early because